Hello and well met. This is Lamron with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I am going to go back and work on some content. I was going to do this in private just on my own, but I decided to share some of the processes and the work that I'm going through. So essentially I'm using the Chat GPT 4.0 to help me create content. I've done other videos on this in the past, so if you're curious about what I'm talking about, you can go back and watch some of those. But nonetheless, I'm using this as kind of like a text editor slash content generator. And when I bring this up, this is basically an NPC that I have basically put together in Chat GPT, and I'm using it to help me organize and create like the stat blocks, for instance. And that's what I'm going to focus more on today is the NPC aspect. So there's a couple usable formats for NPC stat blocks for the DnD5e rule set. The other rule sets work a little differently, so they don't have the same import tool as you do in the 5e rule set. I don't know why that is or if there's a reason for it, but nonetheless, not all rule sets are equivalent in the tools that are built into them. So this is basically a shadowy like entity called the Whispering Darkness. It's a large aberration, it's chaotic evil, kind of has this ball of negative energy, kind of like a cloud, shadowy form. You got all its stats here. And the way that these particular words and letters are laid out are critical, because if they're not in a certain format, they're not going to import correctly into Fantasy Grounds. So that's the important takeaway of this. So the way I have this organized is exactly the way it should show up in the import tool. And if you got a bunch of spaces and all kinds of weird punctuation like hyphens and all that, it's not going to work right. So I've taken a lot of time on this to figure out what the correct format is, and I'm going to put this particular stat block in the chat description at the end of the video. So if you're using Chat GPT 4.0 and you want to kind of like a template for creating NPCs for Fantasy Grounds, I'll go ahead and leave that in there for you. Now, mind you, it'll have all this other stuff in it, but you want to use that for context and to give ChatGPT a starting point, and then you just constantly ask it to use this template. Otherwise, it's just going to give you whatever it wants. I'll just show you some earlier iterations of this. So before I was able to kind of get it to do what I want, it was essentially doing this, which doesn't work with Fantasy Grounds. If you're going to do it horizontally like this, the ability scores have to be underneath each one of these acronyms. And this format right here is not going to work. So if you find a stat block like that, it's not going to do it right. So there's only two particular ways that Fantasy Grounds will accept it. So if you're going to do it horizontally, all the acronyms have to be on top, and then on the second line, you put all your scores and adjustments or your bonuses and penalties there. So that's how it will accept it. Or if you're using the format I'm using, this is the format that is used by the D&D Beyond at this point for stat blocks. So this is the D&D Beyond version of that. So that's basically what we're getting. So here I've just generated some art using DALL-E 3. If you haven't used ChatGPT in a while, you're able to use all three tools within one conversation. I don't normally do that, but I'm just focusing on some kind of horror adventure. And this is my FGU 4.4.6 content commander. So this is basically where I build like stories and stuff. But I've made custom GPTs just for NPCs, just for artwork, just for, making tables and that sort of thing. So I do have some focus tools, but for the sake of the show, so I'm not jumping back and forth, I just kind of done it all in one session. Normally I don't do that because it throws off the app and it just makes a big mess. So basically this is the shadow whispering entity thing. I asked it to make a description of it, and it did a really nice job. It says, create a dark cavernous lair deep underground. The atmosphere is eerie and foreboding. In the center of the lair stands the Whispering Darkness, a large, sinister aberration. It appears as a swirling mass of shadows and tendrils emanating an aura of malevolence. The entity has a vaguely shaped humanoid shape at its core, with elongated limbs that seem to merge with the surrounding darkness. Its form is constantly shifting, with dark wisps trailing off its body. The entity's eyes are the most striking feature, two glowing, malevolent orbs that seem to pierce through the gloom. Around it, the air is filled with corrupted minions. Oversized rats, moles, and bats have been twisted by dark magic. It says these creatures have glowing red eyes and appear more grotesque than their normal counterparts. The rats skitter across the rocky ground, the moles emerge from burrows in the earth, and the bats flutter in the air, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The entire scene conveys a sense of dread and impending danger, a realm where darkness and corruption reign. So that's basically what the output was for the description, and then it kind of imagined that, and now it's got its own way of wording that, and this is what came out. I'm pretty happy with that, actually. I don't like some of the distortion here. It's kind of ugly, but I think it'll pass. Like if you're using this for a homebrew campaign and you show this image, I don't think anyone's going to really care how accurate these are. But I think that just having the picture present in the game really adds to the immersion. I mean, as long as it's not too ridiculous and over the top, I think it'd be fine. Now, if this is a commercial product, I might ask it to actually make this a little bit cleaner. I might ask for less distortion and less deformity. So let's see if it will do that. So I'm going to say, first I'm going to ask it, what is the image generation gen ID number? So the gen ID is kind of like the seed number, and I want to know that in case I want to come back and create something, something close to what I've done before. It doesn't make an exact copy, but what it allows you to do is record the number, and you can come back to Chat GPT and ask it to create that image, and it will kind of make a similar type of image, or at least base it off of the same parameters, so you don't have to keep prompting the exact same thing every time. So the ID number file is file KK2Z. Yeah, okay. So this is it. So this is the actual number. So I'm going to copy that, and I'll paste it in here, and I will say for this gen ID space, and then I'll just put a comma after there. Please update and recreate the image based on the gen ID. I'll say settings and style. And then after that, I'm going to say, please update and recreate the image into a more detailed I'll say high quality. I kind of want it more like an oil painting, but a digital oil painting. So high quality digital oil painting. I'll say RPG type art. And that should help kind of clean it up a little bit. It did a really good job without me doing any of that. So I probably don't need to do this. So create a more highly detailed or detailed high quality oil painting RPG style art for the image above. I'll say for the image ID mentioned here. So I don't want it to just look at that image. I want it to use the actual gen ID number. Okay, so please update, recreate the image into a more recreate I'll just say recreate into a more detailed, high-quality digital oil painting, comma, more RPG style. Artwork with less distortion and deformities. Sometimes this will fix some of it. It depends on what you're trying to do, but this will kind of prompt it to to do the right thing as far, or get closer to what you're looking for. It's not going to be perfect though. You're never going to be able to fully control these things. All right, so let's see what it does. I'm curious. So it should technically take at least the coloring, some of the style features, the shape. It's not going to be perfect, but it will kind of pull on that. So that way it's not a completely different image. I mean, it's going to be different, but it's not going to be, a whole different style, in other words. So I kind of want to keep this style. I like it. It looks pretty good. It looks like something you'd see out of a role-playing product. And then I want to see what it does. And also right now, I'm using Chat GPT 4.0. This is a paid version. Just to let you know, they rolled out some changes today or yesterday where free users can use the talking thing. So there's a mic thing that you can use where you can actually have a conversation with it. See, now I don't mind that, but it isn't exactly what I wanted. I think I like this one better. This one looks way better. This one here, it's got these kind of these weird rat creature things. The bats look okay. I mean, they're supposed to be kind of deformed and stuff, but yeah, it's not really me. So let me change that up again. So I'll copy and paste this again. And this time I'm going to say, with less distortion, more. Okay, now I'm going to say, hey Dan, what's up? So now I'm going to say, it's into a more high quality digital. I'll say 3D animation, comma, let's see. Let's go with, we want it to look kind of like it was rendered with a different program. So let's go with Octane Render. Like style. So I'm telling it to do a like style because if I don't, it's gonna think I want it to make an animated picture, which I don't. So again, I'm just kind of going off of this image up here. This is the image ID I'm using, and I wanted to recreate it. And this was the second attempt, which I really didn't. I didn't mind the background so much, but I didn't like all this stuff. Chilling, just finished dinner, reforming. Not bad. Just kind of working. On some stuff, and I thought I would share it because quite often I do a lot of pretty neat stuff behind the scenes and I don't really share it, and it kind of sucks. I wish I could have my camera on all the time, but then again I don't get a lot of work done because I'm explaining what I'm doing. And so, but this is a way to kind of help get people in the mindset of potentially using tools like AI to kind of enforce or implement some things in their workflow. So in other words, make the stuff faster and a little bit easier to do. It's definitely faster. So I want to say, so what I changed here is instead of oil painting, now I'm going to change it to more of a digital 3D animation. So it'll look a little bit more video game like. And let's see what happens. Sometimes I like the video game kind of look, the 3D look, but probably only 40% of the time. The other time I kind of more prefer this oil painting style because it's more true to the hobby and the actual content that you would see in a book. The video game thing would be good for like social media or maybe just for like showing your players, but as far as like actual products go, I wouldn't want it in an RPG product necessarily, because then it just looks like you took a screenshot of a video game. That's not the look I'm looking for. So this isn't bad. This is actually really neat. I kind of like how this turned out. It did kind of clean up a little bit. there's some moles and rats and bats, which is kind of the corrupted entities. And then this is the malevolent force here. And I like how it put all these weird little hands and stuff and its tendrils. Yeah, that kind of turned out pretty neat, actually. So this is kind of a keeper. So I will download this for sure and potentially use that as my picture. But I think still I like this one the best, the first one. So what I'm going to do is start over, and I'm going to take this thing here and take this. This is my initial prompt. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to Control V. And then I'm going to say expert and detailed Dungeons and Dragons. Let's see, Dungeons and Dragons. I'll say character artwork, because that seems to work pretty good. So I kind of want it to theme it that way. And then I'm going to say, what was that? Detailed. Let's see, no, that's already got detailed in there. I'm going to say epic. Let's see, epic and professional. So when you add these words like professional and expert and those sort of things, it for some reason it kind of steps up the quality. I think that's just a way that it knows what you're after. So epic and professional, professionally rendered. Now I'll just say professional digital composition. That's what I was looking for. Composition. So this is kind of my go-to prompt when I'm making content, and I always add this at the end. So this expert and detailed Dungeons and Dragons character artwork, period. Epic and professional digital composition, because I want it to look nice and polished. I don't want it to look like a sketch. And I've actually told Chat GPT I don't want sketches, I don't want black and white, I don't want Japanese animation, because that's the kind of crap it'll give you if you don't if you say character art, for some reason it triggers it to do anime, which is kind of based off of, I think some of those art generator things are character artwork things, and it thinks that that's what you want, but it's really not. Epic and professional digital composition, period. And then I'm going to give it some parameters. So I could leave it a square, but instead of doing it square, I'm going to do kind of a taller vertical. So what I want to do is say 9 by 16. So 9:16. This will be vertical. So you have to say this, or otherwise it'll kind of just do what it wants. Vertical aspect ratio. So instead of having a square this time, it's going to be the kind of the cell phone kind of orientation. If you don't give it this exact thing here, sometimes it'll just give you what it wants. The other thing that you need to keep in mind is what you're asking for. So here I said create a dark cavernous lair deep underground. The atmosphere, see this will try to show more of the background instead of the creature. So what I want to do is get rid of that, because I don't want it to make the cave so much, because I want it that to be in the background. I want the creature to be up front, and when you ask it all these different things, it will try to pull that in, and then that changes the orientation because it's trying to capture the background too. So I don't want it. So I'll say the atmosphere. I'll just say create the whispering darkness, a large sinister aberration. It appears as a swirling mass, blah, blah, blah. It seems to be surrounded, emerged in darkness. Its form, okay, so I'll say in the background, because this way it puts everything kind of behind the subject or your main topic. I'll just say corrupted rats. So I am modifying my original prompt because, like I said, if you give it a bunch of crap and you want it to make that image, if you want something to pop or to come up front, it'll have a hard time doing that because it's trying to get everything that you're saying. So it kind of confuses it. So what I'm trying to do is kind of tamp it down and say, okay, this is kind of what I want, and so I'm going to leave my settings on here. I still want the 9:16. We'll see what it does. So I learned the hard way, like if you give it too much or too little, it's really gonna piss you off. So you gotta get used to that. Think about what you're giving it. You know, this is describe your topic, and anything that you wouldn't normally be able to see in that photo, you probably don't want to give it that information. You can always make a background and then an image and then merge them later. Yeah, it's Chat GPT 4. This is a paid version. 3.5 will not give you the images like the free version, but yeah, this is Chat GPT 4. Okay, let's see what this did. So yeah, so that kind of brought it up a little, and it didn't try as hard, but as you can see, it's still trying to pull in that background. So let's see if I can take its thing. I'm going to take its interpretation or its modified. I'll say create an image of the horrific. So I'm going to put the word horrific in there, or actually I'll say, do I want to say horrific? Yeah, it is kind of horrific. So horrific will add other elements to it. So that for some reason that keyword does a lot. Like if you're doing horror and you want something really disturbing and spooky, you put that word horrific in there and it changes quite a bit. So it's depicted as a large, sinister, I'll say aberration, cloud-like humanoid, because it's kind of a more of a energy type thing in a Dungeons and Dragons setting. I won't say that because I don't want it to focus on the background, so I'll just say humanoid, and then the rest I will just let's see. So let's see what this does, because this is going to make it a little bit more upfront, like a less. See the entire scene. I'll just say this. I'm going to give it my parameters that I normally give it. But before I do that, I want to say in the background is a dark cavern. That's all I want. I don't need to give it all the whole. I use Dream for my art. I like the idea of all this stuff in one place. Yeah, that's very true. So in the Dream is awesome. I wish I had more knowledge of it. So let's see. In the background is a dark cavern. Okay, so that helps kind of take that background out of it because it's going to try to put it all in there, and I don't want that. So now let's see what it gives me. And now these are kind of random. They're not pulling on the original image necessarily. So I didn't give it the seed that I could have. I could have, went all the way back and gave it the seed number for this, which is this image gen file, but I'm kind of more interested at this point at being more experimental and seeing what it comes up with, because that's kind of the fun of this, right? Is you don't always want the same. Crap. What does it say? Encountered issues. Yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, whatever. So it's so busy right now. It's probably the worst time ever. So I wouldn't expect much out of this app for the weekend, because it's going to be everyone and their mom is off for Thanksgiving, and when they opened up that free part where you can talk to the app and stuff, I think everyone's the free accounts are using that, and it's putting a big load on the servers right now, which unfortunately, but that's how it goes. Let's see if it did anything. So it's going to give you problems today, probably tomorrow, probably Friday, probably Saturday. It is everyone's kind of playing with this right now, so if you're trying to use it to work on something serious, my hat's off to you. I'm sorry, but it sucks right now. It's kind of slow, and they haven't scaled up their services, and there's other things going on there. So I'm not expecting a whole lot out of it today, and for the weekend, to be honest, because it's going to just be hammered with people using it. Okay, so let's see what this does. Wow, that is a big difference. So this is really neat. Although it's too big, very colossal, but I do like what it came up with. That's really neat. I actually would use that. I probably wouldn't take the background. I just use yeah, that is really cool. So like I said, horrific adds a really large amount of change. And I like the way it came out. I'm actually going to use this. I don't care if it's colossal or not at this point because the picture is freaking cool. But what I would do is just use the top half of this, or kind of crop it and just use that as a square. So I might do that, like just make a token out of it and then just use the top part of it. That way, you know, it doesn't look like, because this is way too huge. I don't necessarily want this to be that big. So what I would do with that is kind of, I would say, yeah, the way it looks like it's walking, yeah, it is very cool. It has that appeal that you would want. The only thing is it's kind of colossal, right? It's huge. And I didn't have that in mind, but you know what? I might change my whole mind about this thing. Like, I have a stat block for it, so I can just ask it to change the stat block to large or something. Oh yeah, it's pretty massive. But I might actually change that, because what's going to happen is the players are going to fight this thing, and it can summon up to 12 entities, or these corrupted things that are part of it at a time, at at maximum, and it can only maintain like 12 at a time. So it can't just keep summoning these things because they're essentially an extension of the creature itself. So it kind of would make sense that it's that big. What I think would be kind of neat, but very difficult and a pain in the butt to do in Fantasy Grounds, would be to have like 3 different versions of it at different sizes, or use that extension, what is it, size matters, so that you can scale it up and down in size. So as it puts out minions, it itself turns into like a large creature. So you can change it from maybe every 4 creatures, it changes size. So right now it's huge. It didn't make very many minions. Maybe it only has 1 or something. But then as it releases parts of itself to create these minions, the size of this creature kind of decreases over that. So maybe for every 4, maybe it changes it from huge to large, and then down to like a medium or something like that. I think that would be fun, but I don't think it would be fun in Fantasy Grounds, because you'd have to have 3 different tokens, 3 different NPC stat blocks, or use an extension. And going through all that for a game would be a pain in the ass, I think. It'd be cool. It would look cool and everything, but I don't know about that. It would just kind of, I'd have to practice with it and really focus on how I wanted to do it. And yeah, it can take a lot of time. But nonetheless, the stat block that I use for it is up here, and I've included this in the description after the end of the video. So if you want to play around with this, like I said, you have to have the paid version. The free version isn't going to quite give you anything. So this is the stat block and the background. So let's see. So this is the whispering, what did we call this? The whispering darkness. Okay. So that doesn't say big giant creature, so I might have to recreate that, but that's okay. I'll use my original image. I think that one was fine. So that is basically the stat block, and I'm going to go into Fantasy Grounds, and I've kind of already did a version of to test it out, but I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. And one of the things that we should learn to do and practice if we're going to create content in Fantasy Grounds, whether it's for yourself or commercial use, is to organize your content. So if I just create something willy-nilly here, and I don't create a category, it's going to go in a thing called uncategorized. So when you go to export this out, it's not going to necessarily attach itself to the project that you're in, because what you're going to do is, I got the SRD loaded for just for reference and such, is you're going to want to make your own category. So if I create this now with just having all selected up here, I'll bring in this import NPC, which is a tool that's in the 5e rule set. Now, not all rule sets have this. Like, I don't think Pathfinder has the same thing as you would in Call of Cthulhu. I mean, this isn't a universal tool. This is more impartial to the 5th edition. But there are rule sets that have utilities and other tools for importing content. This just happens to be DnD5e, but if you play at a different rule set, you'll probably have to copy and paste the data. like one section at a time, but at least a lot of the work's done. So now that I have all this in here, what this is going to do is parse all this information, and I have these stat blocks in here in a certain way. They have to be in a certain format. There's two different ways. I actually wrote some articles, blogs about that, where you can have it in this format or you can have it in horizontal, but the stats themselves, the numbers have to be on a second line and the acronyms have to be on the first line. Or in this case, you have this number followed by the number and the adjustment. It has to be like that all the way through, or it's not going to parse. Also, in traits, they should have a period after each trait type with a description after there. Quite often, you'll see a hyphen or some kind of weird, like a colon or just a space or something. That's not going to work. Same thing with actions. It has to have a period after each one of these things. So I have a multi-attack, shadowy tendrils, and summon minions, and they have a period after them. So these are the things that you need to look for if you're going to use this tool. It has lair actions, and it has 3 separate areas for those. It has a reaction, and then this background stuff and the details like that, I'm going to put it over here on the right. Yeah, it's one of those things that you just have to get used to. Because if you don't, this tool is going to be useless. It's going to piss you off. You're going to end up having to go and edit it anyways. But you only have to change a couple little things, not a big deal. But when you're doing a bunch of these, it's a pain in the ass. So clean up the text. That's what it's supposed to look like. I took the background information out because that's not part of the stat block. That'll go on the other tab. And then I'm just going to hit enter here. I'm going to edit this a little bit. I'm going to put the Whispering Darkness thing here. Hit Control V. On the right, you can format text. So I'm going to make that kind of a header, and then these things I'll make bold. And then if you want to, you could make like links and you can do all kinds of stuff. So if I had the token and all that ready, which I don't, but I will, that's the next step. So here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and take a quick look. It looks like it's good. And like I said, if it says traits, don't put a colon after there or a comma or anything like that. That's going to throw this off. It just needs to say traits, all plain text, no HTML markup, no bold, none of that crap. Because that's what you're going to get in a lot of stat blocks that you find in PDFs, or you'll find it online, is that whoever created them kind of made it their own way, and that's not going to work. You can copy from D&D Beyond directly from official content. It will parse because it's done in the correct format. So I'm going to go ahead and hit import. Let's see what we get. So it looks right so far. So I'm going to keep this open over to the right. That's the import tool. And then I have the stat block. And this is what I usually do is I'll go through and check this out. So it looks like it parsed correctly. Everything's on the separate line, even the reactions. Here's the challenge rating, the proficiency bonus. It's a CR6 creature. All the stats are in there. It looks right. So what I might put for a non-ID name, which is a bit essentially what you would want to introduce it as, instead of the Whispering Darkness, I might just say Malevolent Dark Cloud. And that's what will show up in the combat tracker. So if I click on this ID thing, now when I put it in the combat tracker, it's going to say Malevolent Dark Cloud instead of the Whispering Darkness. So I don't want them to know the name of it right away. They may never know the name of it, but I want it to say Malevolent Dark Cloud, something like that, so they get an idea. So that's what, when you use that item not identified thing, when you send this over to the combat tracker, it's going to inherit this name instead of the official name. So what I might do is show you what I'm talking about. So if I have this not identified and I bring up the combat tracker, I'm going to drag this over there so you can see. So now it says Malevolent Dark Cloud instead of the Whispering Darkness. Once they identify, they fight this thing, and they've read some lore, or maybe someone they're with tells them, then you can click on this little eyeball, and it will switch the name over to the actual title. And then the visibility thing is off right now, so if I had this on the map, no one can see it. But I'm going to go ahead and do that. So there we go. So it has regenerative properties. It regains 1d6 hit points. I don't know why this says fire. If the creature takes fire damage, this trait, oh, it doesn't start at the, okay, so if it takes fire damage, it's not going to regen. And it has condition immunities from Charmed and Frightened. It's immune to Psychic. It's partially resistant or whatever to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. So it's pretty tough. It is vulnerable to fire, though. So we had to give it a weakness, kind of balance it out. So it does not like fire. It has sunlight sensitivity. So that's it doesn't like sunlight. It's not going to have sensitivity to the fire, but it just doesn't like fire. It doesn't like the intense heat. It doesn't like the light. And so that's kind of why. That's about the only physical thing other than magic and stuff that bothers it. And on the other tab, this is kind of where this import tool shines. So you get this really beautiful looking summary. You get the, this little stat block thing. You get all the listings here. So this looks really polished and professional. If you're using older Fantasy Grounds content, you won't see these summaries. You'll see just kind of a basic one. So I'm going to pull up a NPC from the SRD, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So here's an adult blue dragon. Okay. So the stat block part is kind of the same. It's, it's got the same layout. But if you go to the other tab, there's either nothing there or there's just a note, maybe a picture, that sort of thing. So you're not going to have that nice summary on older content. When you use the import tool in Fantasy Grounds, this is where you get this this summary. So unless you know how to go in and manually edit the XML file for the NPCs, this is there's no way to get this without doing that. Or you use the import tool, and that's what it's going to give you. So this is just a test to see how it goes. Now, what I was mentioning earlier is not having a group, because now that I have made those and I go to uncategorize, there's 3 different versions of it and they're not in a group. So I'm going to actually delete these because I don't want them anymore. I'm going to start over. And what I want to do is create a group. So this is kind of important whenever you make content for yourself. And if you want to export it later on or create an adventure or module, it's a good habit to get into to create these groups. And the reason for it is it kind of pulls them together into a categorized area. And then when you name all the groups a certain thing, like maybe this is a module that you're working on, all the group names have the same group name, and you would put all your content in there. So if I click on this edit list from this drop down, it's going to just give me an ability to edit these. Now I want to add a category. So it'll default as group 1, group 2, that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is call it, so I know what they are, Chat GPT 4.0 monsters or something like that. I wouldn't call this that for a product, but this is just for a demonstration. So Chat GPT monsters, that's all I'm going to say. I don't need to put the version there. And then I'll just go ahead and click the edit button, which is going to stop editing, and then I'll select that group. And then from here on out, when I create content, I will have that group selected, and then I can import the text. You can still drag stuff over. So if I went to all and I wanted to drag one of my creatures that I made accidentally in a different group, you can just drop this down and see this Chat GPT monsters. You can actually drag and drop those in there, and now it'll be part of that. But I'm gonna make it go back. So here's the aboleth. It's gonna go back to the bestiary. So you could drag those back and forth, but in this case, I just wanted to show you that you can clean it up after the fact. So now it's going to be actually in this particular adventure area. So in NPCs, now I got my own category. So now what I want to do, though, is I want to make the other NPCs for this particular creature. So I'm going to scrap this for now, but what I think I will do, so I don't lose it, is I'm going to take a note. So if I go to the player section and go to notes and just create a note here, and what I'll do is I'll just put, this isn't going to stay with the adventure, this is for development. So I'm just going to do that for a title, and I'm going to take the stat block and take the whole thing, Control A, and then Control C for copy, and then Control Victor here, so that when I go back to this, I'll have it. I don't lose the text. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this. So all of this stuff, Control A, Control Copy, and then I'm going to put that down here in a separate area, or a couple lines. There we go. It even kept its formatting, which is something kind of new in Fantasy Grounds. If you haven't noticed, it will keep formatting in Fantasy Grounds. So if you've made all these changes with like the punctuation and all this stuff here, it's going to keep that formatting. That's exactly what I would hope. So this is basically the formatting that's being kept, and I'm keeping that in a note because once I close this, I'm going to lose my work. So I didn't want to lose all that work. So all right, so now what I'm going to do is make the rest of the minions. So again, I'm going to bring up the import text and go back into Chat GPT and pull the stat blocks out of there. So I had asked it earlier to make all these kind of minions for this particular creature. So what I'm going to do is, here are the bats. So they don't have much to them, but this is the corrupted bat. So I'm going to copy that and go back into Fantasy Grounds and hit Control V for Victor. And it looks right. Looks like all this stuff is in the correct format. So even if you have a comma, like I've seen it where it'll say corrupted bat, small comma, beast comma. If you put one extra comma in there, it's going to throw off the entire thing. So you really have to pay attention to the formatting. Like even this hyphen could throw it off. In this case, I know it won't, but it can. You get extraneous type information like that, it's going to do it. So this background detailed stuff, this goes over here on the right. So I'm going to Control copy, Control paste, that sort of thing. And then I'll delete it from the stat block. So this is the corrupted bat. And what I might do is ask ChatGPT to create separate pictures for those later. But honestly, it'd be more efficient if I actually wrote down a list of all the creatures, made the artwork, made the stat blocks, export them, edit them, do all that first, put them in folders, and then come back in at the end and put it all in the Fantasy Grounds. That would be a much more efficient way to do that. I'm sort of all over the board because I'm kind of showing you a lot of different things. So this isn't my normal workflow if I was going to do a large project. So if you're only doing this for one NPC, that's kind of how I'm showing you, but it's kind of a mess when you do it the other way because you're jumping back and forth between tools and you're doing it can get confusing and it's a big mess. So if it's only for one, not a big deal. But if you've got like 5 or 6 different NPCs and artwork and everything else to go with it, it can really get to be cumbersome. It can really piss you off, and it will potentially make you not want to do it. So just a word of advice. Find a flow that works for you and do it that way. Because if you don't, especially if it's a large project, it's just going to weigh you down. So that's kind of my little advice for this type of stuff. So if you're going to do it right, or do some kind of, there's no right way. It's just kind of figuring out a methodology that's going to work for you. All right, so this is the corrupted bat. I got it all set up. I want to take out this background stuff. If I don't, that's going to throw off the parsing. So go ahead and hit import. It looks right. And the back, perfect. So there's the corrupted bat. And then I'm going to do the same thing. So close this, open it back up, blank slate, go back into Chat GPT and grab the next one. So this is a corrupted mole. And what happens when they're exposed to this creature, they end up turning into this stuff slowly over time, or he summons them, and that he can have up to 12 of these at a time for balance. So that's part of the lore of that creature. So I'm going to go ahead and take this stuff out again. Control V. And again, I usually put this title or the name. I just kind of have my own way of doing this. It will format it for you if you don't have anything in there, like if there's nothing to put in there. But I actually am adding my own stuff, so that's why I'm formatting it. Normally, I just let it ride. I wouldn't even worry about it. But this here on the bottom here is extraneous for stat block information. So if you right click on this, you'll see a cleanup text that takes out the extra spaces and stuff and gives you kind of a preview of what your work's going to look like. You don't have to do that. If you just hit import, it automatically does it anyways. This right click is more like a preview type thing. So hit import, and what do we get? So I'd actually hit import twice, and like a moron here. Double clicked it. Okay, so here's the corrupted mole, and it looks right. So everything is hunky-dory there. Yep, and then the other tab, that's that, and then here's the stat block. So yeah, so this is what you're doing is you're taking your NPC stat blocks. You want to try to generate all of them if you can, or most of them, and then go back and input them, because this is kind of where it can be time consuming, and you know, jumping back and forth between tools is not fun. But in this case, since it's show and tell kind of thing and just kind of making stuff, I was going to share with you the process and kind of the stuff I go through when I'm making stuff. So this is for the DnD5e rule set. We're using Chat GPT 4. DnD5e for Fantasy Grounds. Fantasy Grounds has an import tool for the NPCs. I don't think all the other ones do. They have their own thing, or you'll have to copy and paste in the individual content, but it's still, this is a lot faster than doing it all by hand. So control copy, control V. This is going to be, yeah, so I've had people ask me if, you know, well, how come this isn't in Pathfinder? I don't know. I just know that not all rule sets are developed the same way. I mean, they probably have its own tool to do that. So I'm not familiar with it enough to speak on it, but there are other rules, like Savage Worlds has its own swell or whatever it's called to import stuff. So, you know, they all have their own little quirks, and I don't know why they're not all equal in the tools. Could be the formatting, the developer, I don't know. So anyways, I'm gonna take all this, delete it, and it could also be a licensing thing too. I don't know. All right, so now that I have all that cleaned up, and I got rid of this down here and I transferred over here to the right, if, like I said, you can right click, clean up text. So if there's a bunch of extra like double spacing and stuff, it takes that out. And it will do it anyways, even if you don't preview it. So hit import, and it looks right. So that's what I'm looking for, is to make sure everything's in the right cell, the right area, and then I'll look at the other tab, and there we go. So these are all the minions, and the reason why I chose to create these is because I'm going to make kind of like an encounter table, and it's going to be based off of a couple things. So this is the part of that process. So I wanted to make all those first, and then I should go back and make all the artwork, but I don't have time to do that. So that's what my first step would be. I'd make all the artwork, all the NPCs, and organize it, import it into Fantasy Grounds, whatever you need to do. So I'll do one, and I'm going to do the entity, but I'm not going to create the NPC stat block yet. I'm just going to bring in a token and some artwork. So I'm going to go back to Chat GPT. This is only going to be one of several that you might have to do during a project. But I already downloaded those, so I'm just going to go to like a program like this Roll Advantage token stamp, or whatever tool you can use. Canva, that's another way I do this. There's another tool called, it's downloadable. It's called the RP Tools, the token tool. That one works pretty good. And there's some websites that do a kind of a more of a bang up job where it's just a real quick and dirty way of making tokens. So I'm going to make a token, and I'm going to bring in the artwork and give it that treatment. So what I want to do is go into my downloads folder, And this is kind of where a lot of us get messed up, because what you're doing is you're downloading all these images, whether you're making them or you're editing them, whatever. It's very important to rename these things. So, for instance, the artwork that I downloaded earlier, I want to rename them because I don't want a big mess when I'm working. So these are the things that I downloaded. I'm going to use my original picture. And what I found in Fantasy Grounds is it cannot handle these big long titles, so I need to fix that. So I'll just say, was this Whispering Darkness? Can't even remember my own NPC. So we'll just say Whispering _ darkness. And maybe I will put a prefix so that it lists properly. So what I might do is do an underscore, and before that I might put art. So that way I know that this particular one is just artwork. It's not a portrait, it's not a token. So that's how I would do the organization part of all the different NPCs that you might make. So you want to spend a whole afternoon editing, exporting, creating, retitling, that sort of thing. So this is the Whispering. I want to make sure I got that right. So is it Whispering Darkness? I keep forgetting. Yeah. Anyways, I'll just leave it at that. So Whispering Darkness it is. Okay, so in here, I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to drag and drop it into the token maker. And I'm only going to kind of focus on its face for now, since it's a token. So I'm just going to drag this up and kind of leave it like that. And I kind of liked it when it showed a little bit more of the body. There we go. There's really not much to look at here because it's not really a person per se. So maybe I will shrink it a little. Kind of give you an idea of its form. There you go. So that's the token itself that I'm going to use. I'm going to change this border. So you have some options here, kind of like the silver one, but I'm going to change the tint. So the border tint, I'm going to play around with this, and I want it to be kind of a bluish color, like a kind of a bluish gray. So it kind of matches the theme here. So it looks pretty good. And then when I hit download, it creates a 256 by 256 image. So and I go back into my downloads folder and take a look at this. So right now it's a PNG folder. So what I might do is take this description and rename this because it says token 1, so I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is put TKN in front because I want it to distinguish that this is going to be modified to be a token. And now to take this even further is if you're going to do a large project and you've got several hundred of these, or more than a dozen, I would consider converting this into a WebP version. And the reason for that is these files can get rather big. It's just one right now, not a big deal. So this image here is 1.6 megabytes for the original. And then this Whispering Darkness is like not very big. So what I'm going to do is right click and I'm going to make a new folder because that's usually how I work. So I will just put Chat GPT NPCs and then I'm going to work in there, right? I want to isolate all this from the other crap. And this is where I'm going to organize the work. And then I'll take that folder and put it in the Fantasy Grounds, accordingly. But right now I just have these two images, not a big deal. But when you got like over a dozen of these, you may want to convert it to a different format to kind of tighten it up, to make it a little bit smaller. And I still want to edit this particular image because I don't want, actually this one isn't bad. But basically if you wanted to, you do all your editing now and don't wait till after everything's done because that's a whole nother project. So my advice is do all the artwork first. Make a list, in this case, of your NPCs. Make the NPCs artwork and the NPC stat block. Then download the art resize it, rename it, organize it. It really helps a lot. And then you can even make subfolders. So what I might do is do a new folder, and this one will be tokens, which will go into the campaign folder on the back end of Fantasy Grounds. So if I have tokens, I'm going to put that here. And then I might make another subfolder. And this is going to be art. It's not really an official folder, but it's going to have the artwork in it. And that's kind of where your handouts and the things that aren't maps essentially are going to go in there. Okay, so that's kind of how I organize this. So if I go into, I'm going to hit copy. So this way you can, you'll know that let's say you had 50 of them or whatever. Let's say you're done. Okay, so now I'm going to go back into Fantasy Grounds, go to the assets for under library, go to assets, and you'll get this pop-up window here. What I want to do is go back to this top level. So now what you'll do is you'll click on folder here, and that brings you to the campaign folder for the this project. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control V as in Victor, and that will make these subfolders. And Fantasy Grounds will make those for you except for the artwork one. So you can put the artwork loosely in there, but I kind of like it in its own folder. So once you've added all your images, you've done it all, you hit this refresh. Now it makes a folder called campaign, and here's your artwork and your tokens. But I don't necessarily want that in that particular folder. So I need to go back in here, take this folder, I'm going to cut it because this is just in a regular image folder. And then I'm going to go back to the campaign itself, and I'm going to hit paste, and that's making a tokens folder. So that's important because images are just images. Tokens, however, will go in that token bag area. So I'm going to hit refresh. So whenever you make changes or anything like that, you want to make sure you hit refresh, go to tokens. There's the campaign tokens. Here is the actual creature. So when I make this creature, when I actually make the NPC stat block, that'll be ready, and I just drag it over to it when I'm done importing it. So I'm going to go ahead and develop the little encounters that are going to be linked to the back of this main NPC. So here are all the NPCs for the minions. Now what I'm going to do is go to parcels, or excuse me, I'm going to go to encounters. And what I want to do is scale this up so that it will adjust to the party sheet. So instead of just making a static encounter, I'm going to make some random ones, and then I can also make static ones. So generally speaking, he can only have around 12 at a time. It's kind of hard to keep track of that. So what I'm going to do is just I would make a couple static encounters with just like 2 creatures at a time. So I might make 3 of these, if I wanted to. And again, I'm going to make my category first. So this is going to be Chat GPT monsters. So I want to call it the same thing. That way it has its own group. And then this new encounter, I'm going to drag that in there. So now it's part of this. So the new encounter is just going to be a very generic encounter thing. So what I'll just put is shadow minions or something like that. I don't know if that's a good title, and then I'm going to take one of each and put them in here. And whenever I need a really basic encounter, I have the starting point for it. So this is just a way to kind of just have a kind of at your ready. Once I lock this, it'll change this title. So here's just a basic shadow minions thing that I can place throughout. I can open this up, adjust the numbers when I need to, that sort of thing. So that's kind of a manual thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and create some random ones, which are going to base itself off of the amount of players versus the amount on the party sheet. So it's not the combat tracker, this goes off the party sheet. So if I had several players on here, it calculates off of this. So what I'm going to do is go to random, and then over here, I'm going to add my own group again. So I want to name this as Chat GPT monsters, and then create the random encounter. So what we're going to do is we're always going to have a similar amount of creatures if we do the static one, which is okay. But if you have a one shot that you're running and you want to scale it a little differently each time, this will base it off the number of players that are in your game. So if you have 3 players or you just have like 4, 5, 6, it will scale to that. So what I'm going to do is call this summoned minions, because this is what he's going to use to summon creatures. So summoned minions. And what I'm going to do is drag those in here, one of each. Let's see, so we move this over. So there's a bat, the mole, and the rat. Then what I'm going to do is put the formula in here. So this is kind of where it's kind of fun. So you can just put a regular 1d6, that sort of thing. But I'm going to have it scale. So if you do $PC, that tells Fantasy Grounds to take a look at how many players are on the party sheet, not the combat tracker, the party sheet. And it doesn't calculate allies that are NPCs or animal companions or anything like that. It's all just off the party sheet. So if you have 5 players, it's gonna look at that and say, okay, the number of players on the party sheet. That's what that $PC is. So that's just the starting point. If you're going to use this, it's a random encounter in the NPC area, or under the encounters area, under the random tab up here. And then I'm just putting in the base formula. And the reason I'm doing this is if you're going to run this more than once, it'll kind of scale for you. It doesn't really care about the total party level. It doesn't know, you know, like the mix and all that stuff. It just knows how many party members are in there. So for the corrupted bats, I'm going to say half the number of PCs. So actually it can't do that. So maybe since there's only about 12 that you're able to summon, I might do 1.5 times the number of PCs or something like that. So 1.5 1.5 asterisk. So this will times that 1.5 times the number of PCs. For the moles, I'm only going to say 1 time. So it'll just say the number of PCs. But just to be thorough, I'll do 1 asterisk there. So there's bats and then the rats. So I'll do the same thing with the rats. So maybe I want 2 times the number of PCs or half. So what I could do there is I can say the number of PCs slash 0.5. You do something like that, or in half, so by 2 actually. Okay, so times, divide, multiply, subtract, adding, you know, those sort of things. So that's kind of what you would do here. So this is going to be my summoning kind of thing. And I'm going to link this to the NPC so it's easier to find. I'm not having to dig through Fantasy Grounds looking for it. And since I'm the one who created this content, I'll know that it's there. And I kind of have a generic one in case I need to play some of these ahead of time in the dungeon. But this is going to be the ones that he summons during the final battle. So what we'll do here is we're going to, and keep in mind that one of the rules or balance points was that he can't really have more than a dozen or so. It doesn't have to be exactly 12, but he can't keep just summoning and summoning. If they die, he can summon more, you know, that sort of thing. So this is a way to kind of expand on a regular NPC, kind of make it work for you, and also make it more useful in Fantasy Grounds. So you're not just have a generic NPC that doesn't have anything to it. So now I'm going to create that creature again using my notes that I have over here that I saved earlier. So I'm going to take all this stat block and I'm going to finally create that creature. And the reason I did it at the end, because I needed to build all the other assets first. And that way, at the very end, you put it all together. And that's really the end goal, is when you link everything together at the end. If you do it as you go, it's okay, but you can get it lost pretty easily. If it's only one or two occasionally, no big deal. But if you're doing a big project, you're definitely going to want to compartmentalize it. So I want to take all this stuff here and copy and paste this. So like I said, I'll just say Control A, Control Copy. Even though it's going to copy that background stuff, I don't care. As long as I can get it in here. Okay, so I have that selected. Here's my import, Control Victor, and then I'm going to take this stuff, copy that over here instead, and then delete that. Okay, so that's all set. Now let's see if it imports properly. Yep, everything looks right. Here's the other tab. So, you know, that's what you want to see. However, I want to now include the encounter summon. So again, I'm going to right click and delete it, start over. And I'm going to link that encounter that I made just so you can see what can be done. So even before you import it, you can actually take that encounter that I made. Yeah, you can import. Noldar, it's a tool, but it does take some practice and formatting. So all this text has to be exactly right, or it's not going to work. It's going to piss you off. So I put it. I'm gonna, at the end of the video, I'm gonna put a kind of a sample of that, and I also did an article on our blog about it. The stat block, the formatting, the spacing, the punctuation, all that stuff matters. Otherwise, this thing is useless. So it'll just piss you off, trust me. So now